I'm learning more about myself every week, it seems. And I learned this week that I can't grab big, heavy things and throw them around and stuff with 20-year-olds like I used to, or I'm sore. And yeah, so my back is so stiff today. Feels actually good to stand. If I sit down, it hurts. So when I'm sitting down and I get up and you see me going like this half the way up here, that's just that. So, well, this is very loud to me. I don't like hearing myself that much. Can't imagine what it must be for you. We chose today to pause the series and to go ahead and go through the pretty much the first chapter and portion of the second chapter and have some time for discussion of what we've seen thus far from Mike. As Glenn pointed out on the very first lesson, there's always other things to glean than just what one person could pick out of a chapter, out of a book, or out of a verse, and it doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. It just means that there's more there to be looked at, and so those are the things that we want to give opportunity for. I had mentioned the first week that we did the series that I had noticed some kind of a little theme going through the book of First Peter, and I tried to put together a chart. I told you I was going to put together some kind of a little flow chart that would make it easy to look at and possibly see the points, but I failed at that. I cannot do that. So we're just going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you what I've seen, and then let you guys take it for what it is, and you can write these scriptures down. You can go back through and look at them and see if you kind of see the same theme going through the book. So starting out, I've noticed that he is speaking. He wrote this letter, and it's being sent out to the churches there in Asia, passed around, and there are a lot of Jews, but there's also a lot of Gentile Christians. And so there's this theme that I noticed where he uses these analogies that the Jews understand because it's from their history, but also that the Gentiles no doubt had heard about, and possibly, I mean, can you imagine being a Gentile and saying, oh, I can't be a part of that because I wasn't born into that. You see, they couldn't be God's chosen people up until this time when Jesus came and established this new chosen people, which is his church that he established. So up until then, the Gentiles couldn't be a Jew. And so he uses these analogies, and he is telling it also to the Gentiles. And I believe it's not just so that the Jews understand that, hey, this is your past, but now this is your present and future. This is how it relates, but also to the Gentiles. Hey, in the past, this is how God treated his chosen people, the things that happened to his chosen people. Now they're going to happen to you. Now you are part of that family. You are part of this new family that Jesus has created. So starting off in verse 1, he talks about God's people who are chosen and exiled. So I see here the Old Testament descriptions of like Abraham and a chosen race, and also of Israel and how they were the chosen people and they were also exiled. Examples of that, of being chosen, Genesis 18 and verse 19. Let's see, Genesis 18 and verse 19. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. So we see there that Abraham was chosen, and he is using this analogy, telling these people now in this new Christian age that they are the chosen people, just like Abraham was. Isaiah 41 and verse 8. Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 8. But you, Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen. Again, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and so we see there in Isaiah that again, a chosen people. And the Jews understood this. The Gentiles couldn't be a part of it until now. Now they are part of the chosen, exiled. They were chosen and exiled in Genesis chapter 23 and verse 4 says, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So this is Abraham, and he's a sojourner. See, he's a stranger in a land. And so, and we know about the Israelites being exiled as well. So we see there examples of the old, the way God's people were then, and then he's talking to them people now and saying, you are part of this family now. The next one I noticed was verse 3 says, you are born again to a living hope. So you're born again to a living hope. Now this hope is not centered around the law. It's centered around Jesus. So this new family, instead of being centered around the law and you being born into it by birthright, now you are born into it through Jesus' blood, and now this hope is Jesus. So then the Old Testament images that he uses in chapter 1 and verse 13, he says to gird up your loins. Exodus chapter 12 and verse 11, he says, in this manner you shall eat it, with your belt fastened, and your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. So again, these images of the Israelites of old, and then he's using this very same language to the new Christians now, both the Jews and the Gentiles. The holy people in the wilderness, we saw in Mike's thing, he talked about holy and it being separate, set apart for a religious purpose. So the holy people in the wilderness, he talks about that in chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. Then in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 44, he says, for I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourself, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourself with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground. So this is what he was talking about in 1 Peter when he refers to this verse. He's saying God says, be holy, for I am holy. And as Mike explained very well, we're not talking about being perfect. We're not talking having an attitude of holier than thou or better than you or anything else. It's setting yourself aside for a specific religious purpose, and that is what we are called to do as Christians. So again, this old idea, bringing it forward into the New Testament, the new Exodus and Passover, chapter 1, verses 17 through 21. Christ is the Passover lamb. Now, isn't he? He's the ultimate Passover lamb, and so they all understood the Passover, the Jews especially, but there's no doubt the Jews understood, or the Gentiles understood what the Jews were doing at the time. They were watching them do it. But they could never be a part of it before. And that is in Exodus chapter 12 through chapter 15, all about the Passover. But now he says Christ is the new Passover. So again, this old imagery of the Jews, and he's correlating it all to this new family that Christ has created. He says in chapter 21, chapter 1, verse 22 through 25, that they are the people of the new covenant. And the new covenant is what? What is the new covenant? It is the New Testament, isn't it? It's the law that Christ has given us to live under now. And so we are the people of the new covenant. And then the old covenant is in Isaiah. Here, we'll just read Isaiah chapter 40 and see what that has to say about it. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 3 through 5. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So again, this is a prophecy of Christ who is coming, who is going to prepare a new way. See, and so, but again, correlating it to the Old Testament, Jeremiah chapter 31. I'm not going to read that whole thing, but that chapter talks about turning mourning or sadness, not mourning as in 6 a.m., but mourning into joy, and this is what happens when people become a part of this new covenant. The new temple in chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. They understood the old temple, but this new temple, he says, is built on Christ. Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 16 says, Therefore, thus says the Lord, Behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste. So another prophecy of Jesus being the cornerstone of the new temple. And that new temple is us. It's the church, isn't it? We are the temple. And in Psalms 118, and in verse 22, he says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. What happened when Jesus came and preached his message to the Jews and to the world? They killed him, didn't they? They killed him. They rejected him. But he became the cornerstone. So this is the new temple. Again, this old imagery, that I keep saying it, these are just the things that I saw, that it's always this old imagery that they could understand as Jews, but also the Gentiles can now be a part of, and so that they could understand also. And the last thing I saw was that we are a kingdom of priests. Chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, he talks about we are a royal priesthood. And in Exodus chapter 19, verses 4 through 6, he says, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. So these are not new words. These are not new ideas to the Jews. So he is telling them, and these are the people that crucified Christ, so he's telling these Jews and the Gentiles, you are now part of this family, and it's no longer this old identity that you have. Now you have this new identity, and it's all of you together, Jews and Gentiles alike. So that's just something that I thought was kind of a theme running through the book. And as we continue to go through it, you'll see, and possibly there's more. I'm no doubt there is. Those are just some things that I kind of pulled out of there and could see the correlation from the old to the new. Any questions or comments or compliments up to that point?
Your hands up.
Oh, thank you. She's biased.
Yeah.
and
Say that to anybody else,
and I, I kind of support her, so she's got to be nice. I'm just kidding. All right, so let's start with lesson one. Lesson one started off talking about Peter's life and how he had a lot of high points and low points. And when you look at Peter's life, we can look at a lot of our Bible heroes, and when we really look at their lives, we can see a lot of similarities between us. Go ahead.
Yeah, with reading Peter and also with reading Ephesians chapter 3, how the mystery of Christ says that the Gentiles should be fellow heirs of the same body and partakers of his promise in Christ through the gospel. So we can see that the Holy Spirit is also giving this utterance to Paul
Yes.
as well as Peter.
Yes. It's a theme throughout, and it's good news for the Gentiles, isn't it? It's good news for us, isn't it? Because I don't even know if I've ever even met a real Jew, like somebody who's like Jewish or something. Or if they were, I didn't know it, But so we're all Gentiles, aren't we?
What's really what he just brought up was here how Peter has changed from the day of, I guess, even just before Pentecost, when he denied Christ those 3 times, and some other things that he did then. And he's tended to go even after that, right after, I think it was like Acts 11, where he withdraws himself from Gentiles when some Jews show up. Yet this now is years later, and like I said, the influence of Paul, the Holy Spirit, on him. I think he's including. He's talking to Gentiles too.
Yeah.
Like I said, because they're in the dispersion, they're spread out all over. There's Gentiles that are among these people.
Oh yeah.
That last part that you mentioned there about priests. That's a big thing for us. To
Big
really
thing.
understand that, what it means, what priests were under the old law, what they could do, we now have that opportunity
Yep.
to do.
Yep, I like the way Mike put that. We need to take ourselves just a little more seriously, because of what we are and what we can do that others can't. Others don't have that right or that opportunity to stand before God as we do. Back to Peter's life, his high points and low points. We can look at these things and kind of be encouraged, Because he wasn't perfect, was he? I mean, we talk about David. He was a man after God's own heart. Yet he lusted after a woman, had her husband killed, and then married her. I mean, those are some pretty bad things that we would say, oh man, their history. But yet he realizes his error, and God says he is a man after his own heart. So we can have these low points, and in our lives, but we also can have high points. And Peter was a perfect example of that. Some of his high points was that he observed and even performed miracles. That'd be pretty cool, to be able to actually see that and even make that happen. He was present at the Transfiguration. Only 3 people were there. Let's see, it was Peter, James, and John, right? And then Moses and Elijah were there with Jesus. So he got to witness that. That's pretty amazing. That's a high point, He saw the crucifixion, but he also saw Jesus resurrected as well. So that's another high point. Some of his low points, he denied Jesus, as Glenn just mentioned, and how Mike pointed out. It's odd or interesting that all four gospel accounts give mention of him denying Jesus. He was rebuked pretty heavily by Jesus for even suggesting that he avoid the cross. So the get thee behind me, Satan. Jesus knew he was here for a plan, and he had to fulfill that plan. Did he want to do that? According to his prayer, he would have rather done it some other way. He says, if it, please let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, your will, not mine, be done. So did he want to go through with it? No, he was human. He knew what he was going to go through. But did he? And was he ever going to not? No, because he even, again, he rebuked Peter for even suggesting that he avoid the cross. Another thing that people say is that he preached the first sermon, that was recorded. But I never saw it that way. And this is, I never saw it as him preaching the first sermon, because it says he stood up with the 11. So, and then it says everyone who was there heard in their own language, right? So they thought they were drunk, and they're like, no, they're not drunk. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, so they're not drunk. These men are speaking in tongues being languages that they hadn't studied, that they don't know themselves. So the Holy Spirit landed on them and was enabling them to speak in a foreign language that they didn't understand, so that the people who spoke those languages could hear it. So to me, they probably all 12 spoke the same message, so that everyone heard the same message in their own language, but Peter's was recorded because it was probably in that language. That's my opinion, because if he stood up with the other 11 and everyone heard in their own tongue, well then the others must have been preaching as well. So it's, what do you call that? Splitting hairs, or I forget the word for it, but it always comes to mind when they say, yeah, Peter preached the first sermon, and I'm always like in the back of my head going, no, I think he did it with 11 others, but just my opinion. All right, so then after Peter's life, a little background on him and whatnot, he goes into the meaning of grace. And he begins this book with grace, and then he ends this book, as we'll see, with grace. He mentions what grace is not. And I like looking at it from that side as well. He says it's not liberalism. It's not permissiveness. It's not worldliness. And my favorite, you know what that means, is the premeditation. That one is interesting to me, because it's the danger of presuming that I can do something and his grace will cover me for it.
I look at grace as everything that God gives to us in order to gain salvation that we cannot do for ourselves.
Yep, that's a good explanation of it, because without him, we couldn't do what we do, could we? And without what he gives us. So those are things that grace is not, and he explains those. Any ideas or any thoughts about how we treat grace? Because sometimes we can treat grace that way too. He goes through some of the other ideas, permissiveness, the grandpa that's like, boys will be boys, you know, and or the guy who's like, well, you know, God allows me this one thing, you know, or allows me this because it helps relax me, or, you know, hey, nobody's perfect. You got to have one vice, so, you know, this one's better than that one. So, you know, or trying to, you know, try and rationalize your faults and stuff, and using grace as your scapegoat. Go ahead.
My favorite, or not, you know, anti-favorite,
Yeah.
is God knows my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, we hear that a lot, huh? Hey, God knows my heart. Has anybody been guilty of saying that yourself? I have too, because somebody will, I mean, like if I say something and somebody takes it wrong, you know, I think to myself, well, that's not the way I meant it, you know, and so, you know, God knows what I meant, or, you know, I meant well, or whatever, you know. What do they say, paves the road to hell? Yep, good intentions, you know, another saying. So sometimes just meaning well or whatever, or God knows my heart, that's not enough, huh?
People tend to use it more in the context of their actions contradict the way they should be living, and they say, God knows my heart. Like, God knows that I believe in him. God knows that even if I don't act the way I should, feel the way I should. Of course, feelings are a whole other topic.
Yeah, that falls into that liberalism category that he talked about, that because of grace, I can go ahead and live how I want to and stuff, and he knows my heart, you know, but I can go ahead and live the way I want to, and his grace will cover me. He talks about an incorruptible inheritance. What do we think about that? The incorruptible inheritance. That's part of that. That's why we're here, isn't it? I mean, that's our hope, our eternal body, our eternal inheritance, and it's not things of this world that matter. It's not storing up things here. You know, you hear the old thing, I'm spending the bumper stickers. I'm spending my children's inheritance or something, you know, and people get really wrapped up in inheritances, or earthly inheritances. Both my parents are gone now. My mom just died. Was it last year or year before?
It was 22.
22. So this whole time they've been, you know, my oldest sister, she's the executor of the estate, and so she's been dealing with all this stuff with inheritance and everything, you know, and I haven't had to do anything. Every once in a while I get an envelope in the mail about that thick, you know, like they want me to look through it or something, you know, and I'm like, give me something to e-sign or whatever, you know, or just keep it, because good grief, you know. But people,
You know who has to look through it?
I had my attorney look through it, and so, but people get, you know, families will split. They'll fight and tooth and nail over property and money and cars and whatever, businesses. They'll I mean, watch Dateline, you know. I mean, one of the biggest motivators is money, you know, of murders and stuff. And so this earthly inheritance, people, you know, we need to leave that to the world. We need to leave that to the world. And personally, I don't feel bad for not leaving a fortune to my children. You know, I didn't expect anything, don't expect anything from my parents. They raised me to take care of myself, and that's what I'll do. And that's what I teach my kids. You know, you go take care of yourself. You know, you don't need to, you know, live in the basement and wait for me to die and get my money or something.
A little bit of trivia. Bing Crosby had a lot of wealth when he passed away, but he set up a trust fund that his children wouldn't get any of it until they turned 65.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Have to save for retirement.
Yeah, that probably gives some of them a reason to take care of themselves and live longer, huh? Yeah. I need to be healthy enough to enjoy that when I get 65. So this incorruptible inheritance ought to be something that is exciting to us, right? It doesn't matter what happens here on earth. We can be excited about an inheritance that nobody can take away from us, that God has promised to us, and that is there waiting for us. Go ahead.
It also means to me that it hasn't changed, it's not going to change since Jesus on the cross.
Yep.
Went through that and did that. The devil's not going to be able to do anything to take that away and
Nothing.
change it. So these words are the same for us today as they were
For them.
2,000 years ago.
That's right.
I don't know if you can bring it up, it says incorruptible and undefiled, and I was gonna bring up the point that Glenn just took, he stole from me. But, you know, the devil is corruptible and defiled. And that's stating that Satan has no control, no interaction, nothing to do with what's above, what's in heaven. That's God's domain, and the devil has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you can look at it as this inheritance is sitting there waiting for someone. The devil can't do anything about it. It's sitting there waiting for someone. Is it you? Is it me? That's up to us, isn't it? It's up to us. There is an incorruptible inheritance waiting for God's people. And it's up to us if we want a part of it.
Another verse, a verse that comes to me that is really encouraging to us is Romans chapter 8, verse 1. I believe that's where it is. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There's nothing. As long as we are walking in the light with him, there's nothing.
Yep. Nothing the devil can do to us to take that away. That's up to us. So he talks about in verse 8 and 9 of chapter 1 that we should rejoice in anticipation and that we should remain faithful during our trials here on earth. You know, we're going to have hard times. There's going to be, bad things go on to us, but we should rejoice in anticipation of our inheritance. He talks about what suffering does for us. It confirms a genuine faith. It honors Christ, the living sacrifice. Remember being priests? And I love the point that whatever I'm struggling with, the effort and the pain and whatever is involved in me trying to make myself better or correct this situation in my life or this habit, that is the sacrifice that we as priests can lay. I've always thought of it as I'm laying that sin there, But laying that sin there, he doesn't just take that sin away, take that temptation away or whatever. It's still there. So I like the idea of it's the effort that we put forth, the sacrifice that we have to make to better ourselves. If I have some weakness and I don't fight it, I'm not sacrificing anything, am I? I'm giving in to my own self and my weakness. But if I do fight it and I suffer for it, then that is my offering as priests to God. And I like that imagery there. And it generates joy and love, and it guarantees our salvation, these sufferings that we go through. And he says, God's plan of grace was revealed to us in this generation. That is something special for Christians, isn't it? It says things that angels long to look into. All the prophets and everybody before were working towards something and prophesying about something, and they didn't understand the full big picture. And angels, they were made to minister us, and so, but they didn't even understand this plan that God had for mankind. But it's been revealed to us, isn't it? It's been revealed to us. We have Jesus, and we have his sacrifice, the ultimate Passover lamb that washes away the sin of the world. He bore the sin. Him who had no sin, God made sin so that we could become what? the righteousness of God. So God come down from heaven himself and lived as a man, suffered and everything as we did, was tempted in every way that we were, yet without sin, so that he could be the perfect sacrifice and understand us too. Understand us. It's not like we can say, well, you don't understand. You're God. You're not a human. You don't understand the way I feel. You don't understand my temptations and my weaknesses. No, been there, done that. God did it. So we have no excuse. We could only be grateful for the opportunity that we have, that he gave us, that we can become the righteousness of God. So that's something about grace as well. He says grace means security, and that security means that it comes from God, so it's a sure thing. And he talked about his parents trying to bargain with him after he got A's and talking about getting a bike, but he was like, no, you promised a bike, I'm getting a bike. Well, there is not going to be any of that with, it's not going to be, I know I promised you an incorruptible inheritance, but, no, there's not going to be any of that. It's there, it's a promise from God, and we can be secure in that. It grows stronger with adversity as our faith is tested. We become stronger. If we fail during those tests and we, what is called quench the spirit, we deny our conscience, we don't answer our conscience, then our conscience can become seared. And that is how one falls away. But when you go through adversity and you are tempted and tried and you stand the test, your faith is strengthened and grows stronger. And it has lasted since time began. Anything God says has lasted since time began, and it'll last forever. So we can feel secure in our incorruptible inheritance, the things that he has promised us through his grace. He mentioned, how do I live in the now? Because people ask that. How do I live in this day and age? We have our problems today, don't we? We have it going on in the world and in society. A lot of it disgusts us, and we can get sidetracked with it. But people say, how do we live in the now? Well, every generation has asked that. We have to understand that. Every generation has had their own set of problems. We think, we live in one with automobiles and stuff. They didn't know any of that, so they lived with horses or mules or whatever, but it didn't matter. Sin was sin, temptation was temptation, evil was evil, good was good. It was all the same. So he says, how do we live in the now as a Christian? He says, well, we have to realize that our past has been forgiven by Christ's death. So we don't have to worry about the past anymore, because it's behind us. We don't have to worry about that. And our future is secured by his resurrection. So because of his resurrection, his defeat over death, we have that promise that can never fail. So we can be confident and secure in our future because he resurrected from the dead. If they had crucified him and he hadn't raised, there'd be no point in being here. He would have just been another man, right? I read a book once. It was called Behold the Lamb of God, and it's a really difficult read. I just don't think I didn't think he was a very good writer. I had Laura read it, and she thought it was better than I did. But maybe just different types of, what you like and everything. But there were so many interesting points of that book. And so I started off a sermon one time, and I said, okay, this person was prophesied about, this person did this person did that, this person did that, this person was crucified, this person was denied, all these things, all these prophecies about Christ. And I said, who was it? And they said Christ. I said, nope, it was this guy right here. There were so many false people that arose, that came up, that filled a lot of the bill, that a lot of the prophecies. And it was insane. I'd never even heard of these things. And that's why in that time they were like, no, somebody's going to say he's there, don't go there, don't go there, he's here. And that's why a lot of people didn't believe him, that he was the Christ. But besides the miracles and everything, he rose from the dead. He's the only one. He's the only one of all the others that fit all the other requirements to be the Christ. But he's the only one that was resurrected. So because of that, we have what we have, right? And so we have this security because of his resurrection. So that's also encouraging. So he finishes up by saying, really, the only way to experience true security is to experience the grace of God. And we understand that as Christians, because the world can worry about the Third World War and what's going on in society and who's going to be the next president and what's going to happen to our freedoms and all that stuff. But we don't have to worry about that, do we? We have our true security, and it doesn't matter. As Mike pointed out, also, we should be able to live our Christian life under any style or type of government. It doesn't matter if it's a dictator, whatever. Look at what the church was born under, the Roman Empire. So if it could be established under the Roman Empire and they were being killed as they were establishing it, then we ought to be able to live as Christians under any form of government. Man. Okay, that was lesson 1. We only got 2 more to go through. Lesson 2, we'll just do a real quick recap. He talked about sobriety, and it's because he says that we should live sober. And I like his comparison. We've all been inebriated by something. We went and had a surgery, and they gave us pain pills afterwards. And it doesn't matter what it was. We've all experienced, when you were a kid, and you get the laughing gas or whatever, it's not laughing gas, but the whatever, nitrous, yeah, I wish they'd still give it to me because I hate the dentist, not the person, Do they? Oh, but you got to pay for it, huh? Yeah. I remember the days when it was free. At any rate, but this sobriety and not being drunk with sin anymore and not having a clear head and living your life just as you feel and living however you want. Now you've experienced the grace of God. You become spiritually sober and focused on what you're doing. The things we do under the Galatians 5, he mentions, obviously the things that we do under the influence of sin, and the points that he brought out, you can't. It's all things that we do to each other, that he mentions. You can't have malice, or be envious in a vacuum, So these are all things, the way that we treat each other, So spiritual sobriety, he said it manifests itself in 4 different ways. In particular, holiness, stay focused on the return of Jesus, staying ready, and that's what this spiritual sobriety allows us to do, to stay focused, to be holy, set apart for a specific religious purpose, just like the tribe of Levi. They didn't get an earthly inheritance, did they? They were the only tribe that did not get an earthly inheritance. They were set apart. They were different. So number 2, fear, as in respect. Fear. We have a new respect for God because, again, people put God next to him as their buddy and go, well, God understands me, or hey, I'll go worship God on a mountain. I'll do God my way, and God understands me, like he's their pal or something. But when we study and we realize that it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God, then that commands a certain respect, doesn't it? Because if there is a heaven that people believe, then there's a hell. And there's no place in between. So just like we talked about this incorruptible inheritance that's waiting for someone, if it's not us, then we get the other thing. We don't get the inheritance, we get the other thing.
So if we actually die to ourselves, like it talks about, I want to say in Romans, you should die to yourself to follow Christ. And if we've actually done that, then it totally turns your perspective. Because now you're following Christ, and there's no selfishness in that. There's no, I'm not going to have God my way. If you are truly dead to self, and that's such, I believe it's a process usually, then it's, I will do everything your way, because it's not about me at all. If I've laid all that down, well and truly, then I can clearly follow him without these fleshly things kind of intervening and creeping in.
And if people would just do that, we wouldn't be passing 400 different churches on the way to church this morning. See? But they don't do that. They want to do things their way. And then you can break it down to a personal level too, of self-sacrificing.
Jesus said, if anyone who would not deny himself is not worthy of me.
Yep.
So we daily take up your cross.
Take up your cross.
So we are not sitting on some island of perfection here in the Church of Christ.
No.
We are all guilty of working through that process and trying to strive after him. And it is really where our heart is at. How much are we willing to lay down self, be led by the Spirit, and try to follow Christ the way he has asked us to?
Exactly. The third was love, a new way to love each other. What time do we stop here? Like
3 minutes ago.
Oh, really? A new way to love each other, this new love, that we can experience for each other, as you mentioned. We've all done it. If you're in the military, you've done it a bunch. Me being a millwright, traveling around, I go find a church. I could be in some place, I don't know anybody, nothing, and I go find a church, and I go worship there, and I walk in, and I go, man, I'm at home. I understand these people, we think alike. We're the same people. These people could be over there, and it doesn't matter. We're the same people. So that is something that is special, and we have this love for each other. And then growth. The spiritual sobriety also manifests itself in growth, and kind of what she was just talking about, that we need to continually grow and continually work on ourselves and continually deny ourselves and continually take up our cross, because that's how we grow, isn't it? Through study and buffeting ourselves, and so that we can be a better minister of his word, an example of him. Well, we only got through chapter 2 of and partway through lesson 2, but time's up. But we'll have more time. We'll resume the series next week and do a few more. I guess we'll have to stop at the end of 1 Peter again, and we'll have some more time, and maybe we won't do so much recap or something. I don't know. So, any last minute comments?
Y'all were talking about inheritance. We don't get inheritance anymore. Medicaid, Medicare get it all.
Yep. Depending. Yep. Yep. They'll take every dime you got before they